අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Tuesday, the 1st of August 2023. Shining Sinopec. First consignment of China's Sinopec arrives in Colombo as petroleum market introduces a third player into the industry. Fuel duel. Petrol prices and super diesel increases. Auto diesel reduces slightly. Indo-Lanka convo. Land connectivity essential if Sri Lanka wants to take advantage of India's growth, says Sri Lankan High Commissioner in New Delhi.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අත්තිකාරමක්.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟම ඇති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to today's edition of AdaDerana's English News First at 9. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Let's go straight into our top story for this evening. Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara confirmed today that Sri Lanka has received its first shipment of fuel from Sinopec. Discharging commenced today and will commence operations in the country once agreements with fuel station dealers are signed and finalized. 150 privately owned fuel stations operated by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation have been shortlisted to be partners, with 50 more to be established under the agreement. The first fuel consignment from the newest fuel supplier in Sri Lanka contains 45,000 metric tons of fuel. The second consignment is expected to arrive tomorrow. Sri Lanka today received the first consignment carrying 45,000 metric tons of fuel from Chinese-based fuel retailer Sinopec. According to Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara, discharging of fuel has already commenced, while the second consignment is due on Wednesday. Sinopec Energy Lanka and the Board of Investments signed an agreement on the 14th of July to operate and set up filling stations for distributions with an investment of $100 million. The project will involve 150 privately owned fuel outlets currently operated by the CPC, with 50 new fuel stations to be established. Cabinet granted approval for 3 oil companies including Sinopec, United Petroleum in Australia and RM Parks of USA, in collaboration with Shell plc in March of this year, to enter the fuel retail market in Sri Lanka and to lease 150 fuel stations for each company to operate in the local market. Currently, Sri Lanka has the CPC and the Lanka Indian Oil Corporation as its main fuel distributors, operating in a duopoly market. Minister Vijayasekara said that the entry of new retail suppliers to the domestic market will ease the forex requirements for petroleum products, as suppliers will bring in products on a 12-month financing facility from their principal investors. Hence, there will be no forex requirement from domestic financial institutes. While on the topic of fuel, both Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and Lanka IOC revised their fuel prices with effect from midnight yesterday. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Private Bus Owners Association and the All Island Three-Wheeler Drivers Association insist that the bus and three-wheeler fares will remain unchanged despite the monthly fuel price revision. As established, fuel will continue to be dispensed only upon the submission of the QR code ration system. State fuel supplier Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has revised its fuel prices with effect from midnight yesterday. According to the latest fuel price revision, the price of 92-octane petrol was increased by 20 rupees to 348 rupees, while 95-octane petrol was increased by 10 rupees to 375 rupees. The price of super diesel currently stands at 358 rupees following a price increase of 12 rupees. However, a litre of auto diesel and kerosene saw a reduction of 2 rupees and 10 rupees to 308 rupees and 226 rupees respectively. Meanwhile, Lanka IOC revised its prices in line with the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation price revision. Further, as this price revision is in accordance with the monthly fuel price formula, regulation stands that fuel can only be issued upon the submission of the QR code. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Private Bus Owners Association insisted that bus fares would remain unchanged despite the reduction in diesel prices.
සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ගාස්ුවක් අඩු කරන්න රුපියල් 15වත් 25ත් අතර ප්‍රමාණයක ඩීසල් අඩුවීමක් සිද්ධ විය යුතුයි. මේ රුපියල් 2ක් අඩුවීම තුළ ජනතාවට මේ සාහනය ලබා දෙන්න හැකියාවක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
The All Island Three-Wheel Drivers Association emphasized that three-wheel fares will not be increased following the increase in petrol.
මේ ආකාරයෙන් මාසෙන් මාසයට ගණන් වැඩි කරන වෙනකොට මේ විශේෂයෙන් කුලී ත්‍රිරෝධ රථවල ගාස් සංශෝධනය කිරීම කියන එක කිසිසේත්ම කරන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක් නෙවෙයි, කළ යුතු දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. මොකද මේ රටේ පාරිභෝගිකයා මගියත් ඊටාම අපහසුතාවයට පත් වෙලා ඉන්නේ. මේ සැරෙන් සැරේට එක එක වෙලාවට ගණන් වැඩි කරන්න බෑ.
The Sri Lankan government confirmed that 1.79 million beneficiaries have been selected for the initial phase of the Asvasuma program by the Welfare Benefits Board, and payments will be made for 1.5 million beneficiaries for whom no appeals or objections were received. In a cabinet statement issued today, the government went on to say that 393,097 individuals who currently enjoy Samurdhi benefits and have requested but have not been included in the Asvasuma program will continue to receive the Samurdhi benefit until the appeals and objections review process is completed. Let's take a more in-depth look at this story and other developments following yesterday's cabinet meeting. Under the government's social welfare program Asvasuma, Cabinet has granted approval to a proposal presented by the President in relation to the payment of benefits with immediate effect. As such, 1,588,835 beneficiaries out of 1,792,265 beneficiaries for whom no appeals or objections were received will receive the payment. 84,374 beneficiaries who have submitted appeals to be included in a higher category have been selected as beneficiaries and will receive the benefit until a final decision is rendered following appeals that have been reviewed. Payments for 119,056 individuals who have received objections will continue until the review process conducted with regard to the said objections have been finalized. Further, the Cabinet of Ministers have decided to continue with the existing payments of allowances for elderly citizens, disabled persons and kidney patients until a new criterion is introduced. Cabinet also gave approval to revise the National Authority on Tobacco and Alcohol Act No. 27 of 2006, following a proposal by the Health Minister, Keheli Rambukwella, enabling the appointment of a Medical Officer of Health and Additional Medical Officer of Health as authorised officers. Cabinet gave approval to advise the legal draftsman to prepare a bill for the revision of the Act. In another cabinet decision, ministers gave the green light to award contracts of service supply to Cochin International Airport, to AI Airport Services Limited and to PT Gapura Angkasa to serve in the Jakarta International Airport. The statement said that the decision was given on par with the recommendations of the Standing Procurement Committee appointed by the Cabinet of Ministers after bids were called to select service providers for the division of controlling air passengers, mobile air elevators and air cargo in the international airports of Cochin, India and Jakarta, Indonesia. Meanwhile, Cabinet in yesterday's meeting also gave approval to a proposal by the Justice Minister in appointing new coroners in the country. In a statement issued today, it was said that due to the vagueness in identifying the boundaries of the relevant jurisdictions, inconveniences have occurred when obtaining the services of a coroner who are being appointed on an administrative division basis, municipal division basis and hospital basis. Therefore, it has been decided that a fixed manuals clearly stating the provisions including the qualifications, responsibilities and roles of coroners be introduced. Further, all currently appointed coroners are to be assigned to divisional secretariats and identified hospitals with the appointment of bilingual inspectors for bilingual divisional secretariats and to conduct new recruitments to fill the remaining vacancies in the cadre. The Sri Lankan High Commissioner in New Delhi, Milinda Moragoda, said land connectivity with India is essential if Sri Lanka aims to take advantage of the economic growth of its neighbour. The Sri Lankan envoy also said that an oil pipeline connecting Sri Lanka to India will help to ensure energy security since Sri Lanka lacks adequate refining capabilities. He also reiterated that following President Ranil Wickremesinghe's recent visit to India, emphasis is now on encouraging the inflow of private investments into Sri Lanka.
During an interview with the Indian newspaper The Hindu, Sri Lankan High Commissioner in New Delhi, Milinda Moragoda, said that if Sri Lanka is looking to move forward along with India's growth trajectory, the island nation needs to have land connectivity. He, however, added that building a causeway or highway across the straits will require environmental impact assessments, and there is a process for that. The vision statement issued by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs following the meeting of President Ranil Wickremesinghe with Prime Minister Narendra Modi also stressed on the establishment of land connectivity between Sri Lanka and India for developing land access to the ports of Trincomalee and Colombo, propelling economic growth and prosperity in both Sri Lanka and India, and further consolidating a millennia-old relationship between the two countries. Additionally, the envoy said that since Sri Lanka has insufficient refining capabilities, an oil pipeline could help the island needs, especially if connected to the oil tank farms in Trincomalee, which are also a part of the memorandums of understanding signed between President Ranil Wickremesinghe's visit. When responding to a question pertaining to the timelines for the execution of the projects agreed to during President Wickremesinghe's visit, Morogoda said the emphasis now is on encouraging private investments.
Chinese ambassador in Colombo, Xi Zhenjiang, said deep partnership and cooperation between Sri Lanka and China will help protect the sovereignty of the island nation. He made these comments while addressing an event to commence the refurbishment project of the Supreme Court complex in Colombo. The refurbishment project of the Supreme Court complex, which is funded by the Chinese government, will be conducted under 2 phases and is expected to be completed by the 17th of October 2025.
A ceremony to commence the refurbishment project of the Supreme Court complex was held in Colombo yesterday. The event was participated by Chinese Ambassador to Sri Lanka Chi Cheng Hong, Minister of Justice Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa and Chief Justice Jayantha Jayasuriya. Funded by China, the total cost for the refurbishment project is around 10.6 billion rupees. The refurbishment of the Supreme Court complex, which will take place under 2 phases, is expected to be completed by 17th of October 2025.
When we visited China in 2015 February, together with our then President Maithripala Sirisena, we met President of China Xi Jinping and we signed 4 agreements, whereas the Chinese government gifted very valuable donations to us, which included a hospital with 500 beds in Polonnaruwa for kidney patients, another 2 huge buildings for Colombo and Ragama teaching hospitals. The other agreement that we signed was the refurbishment of this building. We expected to conclude this somewhere in 2018. We initially planned to have the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal shifted to a new building where we acquired 6 acres of land just adjacent this BCC land. But due to various crises in this country, especially economic crisis, that we could not do it. Therefore, there was a delay. Now we are happy the Chinese government has agreed to extend that what they agreed in 2015. It is a timely need and you have gifted it for a worthy cause, whereas this is the symbol of our rule of law.
I'm confident that after the project finishes, the justices and the staff of both Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal will be able to enjoy refreshed working environment while serving the people of Sri Lanka. I strongly believe that our deep cooperation and strong partnership will help safeguard Sri Lanka's sovereignty, foster more robust economic and social development, and build resilience against turbulent world.
The leader of the National People's Party, Anurakumara Dissanayaka, says that the presidential election should be held next year, highlighting that this year is the most important year for Sri Lankan politics. Meanwhile, Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment, Manusha Nanayakkara, emphasised that the incumbent president will be jointly appointed by all parties as the next candidate for the upcoming presidential election. With that, here are some of the views expressed by politicians today.
ඒගොල්ලෝ හිතුවේ මේ වගේ තත්ත්වයක් මතුවේ කියලා. හිතුවද? හිතුවේ නෑ. ඒගොල්ලෝ දැන් කලබලයට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. දැන් ඒගොල්ලෝ මොකද කරන්නේ? ඡන්ද කල් දානවා. ජනතා පාට රැස්සම ගහනවා. ඇයි? ඒගොල්ලෝ නොහිතපු තත්ත්වයක් ඇති වී තිබෙනවා. ඒ නිසා ඒගොල්ලන්ට ජනාධිපතිතුමන්දී ඉදිරි වසර ඇතුළත තියන්නම සිද්ධ වෙනවා. කොතර කාලයක් එක එක පක්ෂ වලට වැඩ කරලා යහපත් අපේක්ෂාවක් බලාපොරොත්තු වුණේ. ඒ කිසිවක් හිතුනේ නෑ. ඒ නිසා මේ ගත වෙන්නේ ලංකා දේශපාලනයේ වැදගත්ම අවුරුද්ද.
එක්සත් ජාතික පක්ෂයට තාමත් රටේ බලයක් ලබා ගැනීමට හැකිවන පරිදි ජනතාව ඒකරාශී වෙලා නැහැ. ජනතාව යම් නිහඬ භාවයකින් ඉන්න බව ඇත්ත. මේ ජනාධිපතිවරණයකින් පැහැදිලි ලෙස ජයග්‍රහයි කර හැකි මට්ටමකට අපි සමග ජන බලවේගය හා සන්ධානයේ ඒකාබද්ධව ක්‍රියා කරන්න සූදානම්.
අපිට එක අපේක්ෂකයෙක් නෙමෙයි අපේ හිතේ අපේක්ෂකයන් කීප දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. මම ඒක නම් කරන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද එය නම් කිරීම මං හිතනවා මේ අවස්ථාවේ සුදුසු නැහැ කියලා. ඒක අපි අද කියන්න ගියොත් කියන්නේ අවුරුද්දකුත් මාස දෙකක් එහා තියෙන මැතිවරණයකට අපි දැම්ම කිව්වොත් දේශපාලන පක්ෂයක් හැටියට අපේ පක්ෂයට මෙන්ම අපේක්ෂකයාටත් කරන හානිය. මේ රටේ ඊළඟ අවුරුදු 5 මේ රට පාලනය කරන්න සුදුසුම පුද්ගලයා අපි ජනාධිපති අපේක්ෂක හැටියට ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා.
ඉදිරි ජනාධිපතිවරණයට රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිතුමා පොදුවේ සියලු පක්ෂවල එකඟතාවයෙන් ඉදිරිපත් වෙනවා. විපක්ෂයේ කීප දෙනෙක් විතරක් වෙනත් අපේක්ෂකයෙක් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරයි. හැබැයි මේ වෙලාවේ පක්ෂ දේශපාලනයක් නෙවෙයි රටට අවශ්‍ය වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
Sri Lanka records a trade deficit in June 2023 compared to 2022. More on this after a short break. Stay tuned.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි. ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
අපේ ගෙදරත් ආපිකෝ මෙට්‍රස් තමයි.
මාදිලි රසකින් යුත් මෙට්ටලුවේ ප්‍රමුඛයා. ආපිකෝ මෙට්‍රස් සැපනින්දට සැප මෙට්ට.
Welcome back. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka says that the country recorded a trade deficit in June 2023 compared to the trade surplus recorded a year earlier. The central bank made this disclosure while presenting its latest reports on the performance of the external sector of the country's economy. The deficit in the merchandise trade account amounted to $364 million in June 2023 compared to the surplus of $22 million recorded in June 2022. Meanwhile, the cumulative deficit in the trade account from January 2023 to June 2023 narrowed down to $2,289 million from $3,506 million recorded over the same period in 2022. In June of 2023, the income earned by export of merchandise declined by 19.5% to $1,005 million, as all major subcategories of merch recorded a decline in June 2023 compared to a year earlier. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka said that the cumulative export earnings from January to June 2023 also declined by 10% over the same period in the last year to $5.87 billion. Express exports increased 11.6% to $1.36 billion in June 2023 compared to $1.2 billion in 2022. The increase in import expenditure was observed across all main categories of imports, which was supported by the significantly low base in June. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka report said that the cumulative import expenditure during the first half of 2023 dropped by 18.6% earlier. The central bank hopes the relaxation of import restrictions commenced during June and July of 2023 could gradually generate higher import in the period ahead. Meanwhile, workers' remittances increased notably to $470 million in June 2023 compared to $274 million a year earlier, but was slightly down from $480 million in May of 2023. Between January and June this year, there were 146,437 departures for foreign employment and 24,087 departures in May of 2023. Tourist arrivals increased to 100,388 in June 2023 compared to 83,309 arrivals recorded in May 2023. Meanwhile, the total tourist arrivals from January to June of this year amounted to 624,874 compared to 411,377 arrivals in the same period last year. Earnings from tourism in June 2023 were estimated at $123 million in comparison to $100 million in the previous month and $45 million in June of 2022. Earnings from tourism from January to June of 2023 amounted to $875 million compared to $680 million from a year earlier. That's a lot of numbers. Oil prices reached the 3-month highs on Tuesday as investors focused on tightening global supplies and demand growth in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, analysts predict oil prices to stall this year as high interest rates curb demand, offsetting the impact of OPEC plus production cuts on supply. Brent crude futures closed at $85.43 a barrel, down 20 cents. Front-month Brent settled at its highest since April 13th on Monday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures closed at $81.53 a barrel, down 27 cents from the previous session's settlement, which was its highest since April 14th. According to analysts, oil prices may face a correction risk as markets may have been overbought in the past month. The latest figures from the United States, the world's biggest fuel consumer, showed fuel demand rose to its highest level since August 2019, according to Reuters reports. On the supply side, this Friday's OPEC Plus meeting is expected to see Saudi Arabia roll its voluntary cuts through September, further tightening supplies. Saudi Arabia is expected to extend a voluntary oil output cut of 1 million barrels per day for another month to include September. Riyadh's existing cuts have already constrained supplies, with oil inventories beginning to fall in some regions as demand outpaces supply. Global stocks were mostly down on Tuesday as declining factory activity in the Eurozone and China tempered investors' optimism over global economic prospects and a likely end to US rate hikes. The market also remained cautious as traders looked ahead to corporate earnings, central bank meetings, and a key employment report due later this week.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.12% to 35,603.7. The S&P 500 lost 0.29% to 4,575.84 and the Nasdaq Composite dropped to 0.6% to 14,260.44. European stocks fell 0.7%, deepening losses through the morning and stepping back from a 2% increase in July, its second month of gains. Losses accelerated across European markets after data showed manufacturing activity in the bloc contracted in July at the fastest pace since May 2020 amid slumping demand even as factories cut their prices sharply. The MSCI World Equity Index, which tracks shares in 47 countries, fell 0.4% after gaining 3.5% last month. Signs of a peaking out in European inflation yesterday echoed the narrative in the United States, proving more evidence that the biggest central banks are nearing the end of their tightening cycles. Yet other data gave cause for caution on prospects for the global economy. China's tumbling post-pandemic recovery remained in focus, for instance, after a surprise contraction in manufacturing in a private sector survey released Tuesday of last week. The positive US narrative also faces some crucial tests this week, with several closely watched job reports due.
That wraps up my news bulletin for tonight. Join us again at the same time for more news on Sri Lanka's premier news channel tomorrow. For now, I am Jonathan Benedict wishing you a good night, a blessed Wednesday tomorrow, and a blessed month of August ahead.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.